The more you learn about aging, the less fear it holds. It's a little bit like a kid. I think of, when I was little, I used to make a running jump onto my bed so that the monster under the bed didn't grab my ankles, right? And it takes courage to look under the bed. And honestly, there are monsters. Your body does slow. You do lose people you love. Those are the only two universal negatives about growing older, right? And there's also all sorts of power and enrichment and growth that happen too.
Hello, and welcome to Not Born Yesterday, a podcast dedicated to older adults and the challenges and joys of aging. I'm Miriam Goodman. Not Born Yesterday is an award-winning program providing expert advice on issues related to older adults, their adult children, and anyone who works with or lives with elders.
Not Born Yesterday is brought to you by Next Village SF, providing services and support to older adults, and the Fromm Institute for Lifelong Learning. I'm Lynn Winter-Gross.
Today on Not Born Yesterday, we're talking about a subject that concerns almost everything else we talk about on the podcast, and that's ageism. Since many of us confront ageism every day, we thought we should remind you who don't that it's one of those isms that is still around and is the stereotyping on the basis of age.
One of the goals of this podcast is to shatter these assumptions. Ageism is discrimination no matter at the doctor's office, in a work situation, a serious conversation, in political life, or in our own denial. It's not a matter of whether someone gives you their seat on the bus. It's rather the way you are perceived, and more importantly, the way you see yourself.
Our guest today has been studying, writing, and speaking about ageism and its consequences for years. As an activist working to eliminate ageism around the world, Ashton Applewhite is the author of This Chair Rocks, a Manifesto Against Ageism, as well as several other books on stereotypes and attitude. She is joining us today to talk about ageism and perhaps to make activists of us all. Ashton, welcome to Not Born Yesterday.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Well, let's start with the hard stuff. You've written that ageism serves a purpose by sustaining inequality and making it legitimate. What do you mean by that?
Well, ageism, in that sense, serves the purpose that all prejudice serves. In the broadest sense, all prejudice pits us against each other because prejudice requires an other, some group to compare yourself to, and typically, given our regrettable human tendency to rank ourselves in sort of hierarchies of value. And I mean, another example would be stay-at-home moms arguing with moms in the paid workforce about who's a better mom, instead of joining forces to close the gender wage gap so women could choose whether or not to stay home. As long as low-paid factory workers are fighting about who gets the job, instead of organizing, we don't come together to address the power structures that disadvantage everyone except the people at the very top of the heap.
So to go back to ageism specifically, what are the roots of ageism? How did we get here?
Things change. Urbanization happened. People stopped living in small mixed age communities. In large fact, capitalism happened, global capitalism, which is probably the single most powerful overarching force in ranking us in those hierarchies of value. Older people in some ways started being conceived of as an economic burden. We invented the retirement home. We invented Social Security, both of which have all kinds of benefits as well as drawbacks and so on. But old age started to be conceived of separately. So it's a product of these massive global social, economic, and cultural and social shifts.
So how can we as individuals challenge ageism?
Well, all change starts with awareness, and most bias is unconscious, and we can't challenge something unless we're aware of it. So counterintuitively, the starting point is, instead of looking for evidence that we're not ageist, which of course no one wants to admit that they're biased, or most people, is to look for evidence that we are, to look at our own attitudes towards age and aging, to think about how you use the words old and young, for example. Do you buy, what kind of birthday cards do you send people, and so on? Is your friend group entirely people your own age? Stuff like that. And I'm happy to give more examples. And that is the hardest part, because because we grow up in a culture that bombards us with negative messages about age and aging. But once we start to see that they have found their way between our ears, we're all biased. That's internalized ageism. It is like letting a genie out of a bottle. Then you can see it. You see it all of a sudden, right? In advertising, in billboards, in conversations. And that point, you're like, oh, it's not my fault. I'm not a bad person. This is everywhere. It is a collective problem. And that means we can come together and do something about it. But it starts with acknowledging our own attitudes and the way we have all been conditioned to think in largely negative ways about the second half of life.
So Margaret Mead had said that getting older gave her courage and confidence to speak up and challenge ideas and attitudes that she disagreed with. She called it, and I love this word, postmenopausal zest.
Yeah.
It seems like something older people should embrace, and perhaps that would help us end ageism. How do we do that?
Well, I'm curious about whether your experience is the same as mine, that especially as a woman, later life is a time of liberation. We are freed up in lots of ways from expectations. I think we care less about what people think. I see you both nodding. So in that sense, it is for many people a time of enormous gratifying change. People embrace creative enterprises, et cetera, et cetera. However, one of the best pieces of advice I got when writing my book was don't use the word should. And it's really important to acknowledge that getting older is complicated. We each have to navigate this stuff in our own way and in our own time. There are so many messages out there, especially aimed at women, at what we should and shouldn't wear, what we should and shouldn't do, what we should and shouldn't say. So each of us, our path for each of us is of course different, and it's shaped by where we live, by who we're surrounded by how much money we have, et cetera, et cetera. So each path is unique.
You've written before that the too common view of later life is depressing when the reality for so many is different, what you're just saying now. Does that mean we should see more superagers jumping out of airplanes in their 90s? Is that going to help us allay the fears of aging, or is there something more practical we could be doing?
Well, how do you feel when you see one of those octogenarians jumping out of an airplane?
I say, so what?
I mean,
doesn't apply to me.
You're more tactful than I am. I sort of smack my forehead and go, geez, I won't, I'll manage not to curse on your podcast maybe, but, there are lots of people who find, if not the skydiving octogenarian, but the marathon running octogenarian inspirational, and more power to them. Most of us, by definition, are going to muddle along in the middle. Most of us all of our bodies are going to slow down. Most of us are going to experience some cognitive slowing down, but in a very limited way, right? You do lose, most of us, that tip of the tongue thing, or the name of the movie that you saw with what's her name, but that's all we lose. 20% of people escape cognitive decline entirely. We all know some of those smart 90-year-olds, right? Not smart, but, super sharp. No one hears the fact that dementia rates are declining. Sometimes I think I'm in the both side of the story business. It's not that the scary stuff isn't real. You will never hear me say that. It's that we never hear the other side of the story. And it's not counterintuitive, but it sounds counterintuitive because because all we hear is negative, that the more you learn about aging, the less fear it holds. It's a little bit like a kid. I think of, when I was little, I used to make a running jump onto my bed so that the monster under the bed didn't grab my ankles, right? And it takes courage to look under the bed. And honestly, there are monsters. Your body does slow. You do lose people you love. Those are the only two universal negatives about growing older, right? And there's also all sorts of power and enrichment and growth that happen too.
Well, the TV ads aren't helping much when they show
They
all
are.
of the problems that older people have and this medicine and this drug for that. And it makes us think that this is a bad place to be, having all these aches and pains.
It does. I mean, and that's, that's complicated. I'm constantly looking back at things I used to say and smacking myself on the forehead. You touch on something that is really tricky. People call me and they say, oh, we want to consult you. We want to sell XYZ to older people. We want to tap into the, older people market. The fact is, and bear with me because it's complicated to make, maybe it's my feet, maybe it's your shoulder, maybe it's your innards, maybe it's, we each age differently. Our bodies work less well. For a lot of women, if they're, if they start to have wrinkles and they have fed for a long time on the admiration of men, that's a real loss. No judgment. It's different for each of us. But the reason there are so many ads for stuff is that older people do take more drugs. The rest of it, people like, what about, how do we sell what old people want? Old people want the same stuff everyone else wants. We want the same, if I love, reading or playing poker when I was 30, I probably am going to continue to love it, or hiking or being outdoors or traveling or knitting or what you name it. It didn't change because I got older. Ask the people you're actually selling it to, because so many people in marketing and advertising are young because the industries are so ageist. And we're not so different. It's not our age that makes us want different things. It's because we are intrinsically different from each other.
Well, just along those same lines, I saw a blog of yours where you were not so happy that a major cosmetic company was giving money to Stanford, to their Center on Longevity, to study anti-aging, and you didn't like the connection. So could you explain why you were offended? And it was a gift to the university, I guess, and what the downside of it was?
Well, the anti-aging piece of the beauty industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they keep changing their terms. They were going to reframe the conversation. This is a quote from the Estee Lauder website: reframe the conversation from anti-aging to visible age reversal. Well, what's the damn difference? And right, they are the same thing. And the director of the Stanford Longevity Center did this like tortured reasoning. Little research has explored the link between appearance and well-being. That's just not true, right? We have learned from the body acceptance movement and the proliferation of social media that a focus on appearance is detrimental to mental and physical health, starting with really young girls who are already doing, preventive, getting their faces filled with Botox to prevent wrinkles before they even show up. None of this is good for us. But that well-being is rooted in acceptance of change and adapting to change, not in pretending that it's never going to happen to us. So I hope Stanford got a chunk of change, but they sold their soul.
What have we learned from other cultures? Is this different in America than it is in other places around the world, how older people, or olders, as you like to call them, are treated?
It's different everywhere. Each culture is unique. In India, most people, older people, live with their families, from birth to death. That's different. Everywhere that people have moved out of villages into the city, that tends to foster age segregation. And segregation is never our friend, of any. If we don't come into contact with people who are different from us, we don't see them. And then their well-being becomes less visible to us. But I will say that societies that venerate older people are not great societies in which to be young. And I want a world that is age neutral. But I guess I would love to put one fact in front of your listeners, which is that the defining characteristic of late life, say the people who study it, is heterogeneity, diversity. the longer we live, the more different from one another we become, because we age at different rates, socially, physically, developmentally. So the older the person, the less that number says about us. Isn't that wild? And you said at the beginning, aging is stereotyping. Well, all stereotyping is ignorant and problematic, but it's especially ignorant when it comes to age, because we grow more different from one another.
What's the relationship between ageism and elder abuse?
Ageism is any judgment on the basis of age, and younger people experience a fair amount of it as well. And women experience it lifelong. We are never the right age. First, we're too young because kids don't have rights. Then we're too, sexy and silly to be taken seriously. And then we're too fertile. And then we're not sexy or fertile anymore. So ageism is a lifelong issue, especially for women. So when we think how little elder abuse is discussed in the society compared to domestic abuse, compared to child abuse. Many older people who experience abuse are ashamed to ask for help, and worst of all, may think they don't even deserve help. That's that internalized ageism piece of it. And the structural piece of it is that so many fewer resources are devoted to educating people about what forms elder abuse takes and how to report it. If we don't respect a group of people, and if we don't see them, if they are more isolated, as is the case with many older people, then their welfare becomes less of a human right. So there's a very strong connection between our excusing of derogatory attitudes in general towards older people and legitimizing their abandonment and even their abuse.
We talked about phrasing and we're never the right age. My favorite line I just heard the other day is, eventually you stop lying about your age and start bragging about it. And I thought that's great. That's where we should all be. But some of us.
What I want is everyone to be in the middle, where you don't have to lie about it and you don't have to brag about it. It's just an important, real fact about you. It's why I don't love the phrase age is just a number, because that suggests that we should want to wish it away. It's a real number. Age is real. My friends say happy birthday, and then they're like, did I just put my foot in my mouth? Happy birthday. We are the age we are. But wouldn't it be great if there was not a value given to a given age as better or worse than another age?
Like when they say, oh, you look good for your age.
Yeah, just you look good. That'll do.
Is there anything that you want to add to tell our audience how to deal with their internal ageism?
Here's a suggestion for becoming aware of your internalized ageism. And again, no judgment. Everyone is biased. Is to think about how you use the words old and young. Do you say, I don't feel old, maybe? What does that really mean? What does feeling old mean? I think what it really means for most of us is that I don't feel incompetent. I don't feel invisible. I don't feel useless. And I don't know about you, but I felt all those things when I was a young teenager, worse than I ever felt later on. I feel young. I feel powerful. I feel energetic. I feel with it. We can feel those things too. So to try to decouple the words old and young from terms with value and use those actual words, describe how you actually feel rather than blaming it on age because someone else your age ran up that mountain in 5 minutes yesterday or never even thought about running up that mountain, right? We're different from each other, and we're more different from each other as we get older. And I'll give a suggestion, which is that it's really, really important to try and have friends of all ages. We live in a really age segregated society. So think of something you like to do and try and find a mixed age group to do it with. If you're having a party, try look around the room and try and make sure, to invite some people who are a different age and maybe come from a different culture, mix it up if you feel like it, because that diversify, that enriches our lives. And try and break the habit. We all do this, no judgment, but of making a beeline for people your own age when you come in a room or go to a meeting, right? Right away, you're sitting next to, you may like them, you may not like them, but you're not going to like them or not like them because of how old they happen to be. Well,
thank you for all this information and advice. And I hope that we've started a whole trend of change making among our listeners today. Our guest was Ashton Applewhite.
Today on News You Can Use, we're looking at late in life divorces in other cultures. If you've ever wondered why the number of what we know as gray divorces is going up, look at retirement as a contributing factor. The relationship between partners is greatly affected by retirement. For example, if a retired husband assumed his wife is going to give up her routine, which may be a career, involvement with the grandchildren, volunteering, friends, exercise, just to be with him all day, every day, and he's never discussed this expectation with her, there will be problems in the marriage. Or if a previously high-ranking chief now finds himself at home without a support staff and no one to tell him how important he is, things can become unpleasant for both partners.
In Japanese, the term nure-uchiba means wet leaves. It's used to describe retired husbands who stick to their wives no matter how often they try to pull them off. Today's Japanese women are constantly sweeping aside these clinging wet leaves, and they keep sticking. Now there are reports that many Japanese women are showing physical signs of stress as husbands retire and are miserable at home. A Japanese doctor, Nobu Kurokawa, named this retired husband syndrome. Dr. Kurokawa says that as many as 60% of wives of retired men suffer from this condition, with physical symptoms such as rashes, dizziness, irritability, or ulcers. Note that it is the women who are getting sick as the men retire.
Cut off from social network at work, the Japanese husband now has hours of empty time on his hands. One husband related that he didn't know how to do anything for himself, and he expected his wife to serve him. He also had no friends outside of work, while his wife had many.
Contributing to this disconnect is the fact that many women in Japan and elsewhere continue to work after their partners have retired. Many women in the United States and elsewhere stayed home with young children and entered the workforce later and are not quite as ready to retire as their husbands are. Now in their 50s and 60s, they have finally attained the position they wanted, and they don't want to give it all up for what they see as days of idleness or servitude at home. Also, women often marry men older than they are. So even if their spouses are ready to step off the fast track, the women feel they still have some good working years ahead of them. This wouldn't be a problem if the husband had his own interests and friends, but too often he expects his wife to retire when he does and provide these things for him. Adult couples of all genders and combinations need to sit down and discuss their expectations about retirement before it happens. Assumptions cannot be made, or trouble is sure to follow. Before we go, we have a request. Lynn and I often hear people say, this is the worst part of aging, or sometimes, this is the best part of aging. We would love to know what you think are the best or worst parts of getting older. Please send an email with your thoughts on the positive and or the negatives of aging today. We plan to create an episode on this subject in the future. Please click on the Contact Us form on our website, notbornyesterdaypodcast.org.
And that's our podcast for today. Our thanks go to Ashton Applewhite, an activist on aging. You can learn more about Next Village SF at their website, nextvillagesf.org. Our music is from Hook Sounds, and Jason Dahlstedt is our engineer. And we thank you for listening. We'd love to hear what you would like us to discover and discuss. Please contact us at notbornyesterdaypodcast.org. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. All of these are free, and they help us to know our audience better. Be well, stay strong, and remember, you weren't born yesterday. I'm Lynn Winter Gross.
And I'm Miriam Goodman.